everyone, and welcome back. I am Destro, and this is Realm of the Lich King, and today we're going to be doing a commission project. I'm building an industrial storage tank. Someone asked me to build this for them. I'm making it primarily out of Pringles can. They're a good size, they're a good shape, and I thought that I would take this opportunity to give you guys all a few tips to help improve your own terrain projects. So, jumping right into that, as soon as I've finished cutting up these bits of cardboard here, number 1. Send for reinforcements where necessary. So Pringles can isn't exactly the most sturdy material, and it's also weighted about the same up and down the whole way. So I've got this big chunky bolt here, and I'm going to put that in the bottom to add a whole bunch of extra weight. The rolled up cardboard is to add a lot of extra sturdiness, and as you can see here, when I was drawing this circle that I was going to use to cover up the end of the Pringles can, I didn't pay enough attention to where I was drawing it, and I had to draw it again. This is why it's important to measure twice before you do anything. So, get that circle cut out. That's just going to go on the end of the can, hide all that corrugated cardboard inside, and form the top of the Pringles tank. And this will be nice and sturdy with that corrugated in there. Number 2. Disguise your materials. As I was saying, the Pringles can is, like many cardboard cylinder sort of shapes, it got this kind of distinctive diagonal swirl to it, and if you can see that in the finished product, it's gonna look like a cardboard tube. This hits a lot of materials, especially pop cans, really hard. If you see a pop can, you know that's what you're seeing. It's a really distinctive, sort of recognizable item, and you want to hide that if it's possible, so that your terrain doesn't look like a large pop can next to a Space Marine or whatever. But cover it up with a little bit of brown paper tape and smooth down the wrinkles with a metal ruler. And once you got the decorations on there, people won't be able to tell quite so easily. And speaking of decoration, number 3, the right glue for the right job. When you are a terrain crafter, you don't want to have just one kind of glue on hand. What I'm using here to glue these cardboard strips down is tacky glue, and that's great, it'll give a really strong bond, but it doesn't set as fast as I would like. So, putting a little bead of hot glue on the end of each of those strips will tack them down and hold them in place while the more effective glue dries. If you went and glued this whole thing down with hot glue, it would be not too difficult to pull up later, although I am going to do something that'll help with that. But before we get to that, remember that bolt? Just a real quick little demonstration here. Having that bolt in the bottom adds a ton of stability to this thing. That's not going to be toppling over unless you, proper knock it. Number 4. Dressmaker pins. Surprisingly useful. A couple of things are true about most terrain pieces. 1, they're going to be made of relatively flimsy materials. And 2, you're not going to see the inside of them. That's especially true with something like this, where I've filled it with corrugated cardboard. That means that the inside doesn't matter. You can hide stuff in there. And one of the things you can hide in there is the back of a dressmaker's pin. As you can see me here in the background, forgetting to take the cap off my glue. Anyways, pins. These things are great. The heads are rounded, they're just about the right size to make nice little rivets, and you just drill a little hole, shove them in there, and they will hold your cardboard in place, they will hold your components in place, and they'll be decorative while they do it. Now, what I'm doing for the top here is similar to the thing that I did in the refinery build way back, if you've seen that. I cut a little railing out of granny grating, just, used my knife to cut out some of the connecting rods to make a little railing that didn't look like granny grating, because remember, disguise your materials. And, unfortunately, I measured wrong, so I had to drill more holes, but we're going to hide those in a later step. Oh, and I don't think I show it, but I had to add some toothpicks to make those railings stand up straight. The material wanted to be flat, not round. Number 5. Everything is an improvised tool. And this goes double for models. Yeah, I've got a ruler, but that little Space Marine will tell me about where I should place the rungs on the ladder I'm going to make for this thing. 1 centimeter, I think it ended up being. The important thing, though, the improvised tool, hey, I got a paintbrush kicking around, and it's got a big metal ferrule on it that's just about right to bend some wire around. Make a little ladder rung. I had to make maybe 20 of these to cover all of this tank, and then I had to drill some little pilot holes, pull out some of those dressmaker pins, because hey, rivets that can be removed if you need to? Genius. And then a little bit dab of super glue on the ends of this bit of wire, and in they go. thinking about it, hardware staples might have worked pretty well to do something like this if you wanted something preformed, but I didn't have any hardware staples on hand. All I had was this copper wire, thin gauge, and it was easy enough to bend it around a ferrule and glue it in place. As an added bonus, because I was using the ferrule, no need to measure all those individual lengths of wire. Number 6. Mistakes are opportunities. In this case, we're going to be grabbing some of this corrosion texture paste, and we're going to be using that to cover up those errors that I made. Big blob of that on that gap where I didn't cut the cardboard quite long enough. A big blob of that on this crease in the tape that I couldn't quite flatten. Big blob of that where these cardboard ends just kind of stood up a little bit. Adding all this detail, gonna look great in the end, and it hides my sins. Remember, texture paste covereth a multitude of sins. Oh, and this is of course just this little sort of hatch grate thing I wanted to make for the top of the tank, so there'd be a little access hatch. I got some chipboard, cut some little triangles out of that, stuck it on the top with a length of plastic rod and a bunch of craft pearls. Used craft pearls for the rivets on this because it was just going to be easier than drilling all those holes. Painting is pretty simple: primer, heavy dry brush of silver, and then a little bit of this rust wash over those corrosion spots. Number 7. No airbrush? No problem. I picked up this stencil a little while back and I wanted to give it a use, and I thought this would be the perfect project to do it on. Now, you can certainly do this with an airbrush, and I do have one, but I wanted to show that even if you don't have that kind of tool, you can still do this with a brush and it'll still come out. Measuring these, maybe not so exact. I didn't really get that one perfectly lined up with the others, but, you know, get it on there, and then use that same paint to lay down the base for a few graffiti pieces I'm going to do on the bottom here. The client asked me to do some graffiti, so I'm putting it all on here freehand. You could use transfers for this, but again, I don't have them, and I don't have transfer paper to print my own, and you need special fixing, you need all kinds of stuff to do that. I've got paint, I've got a brush, and I'm reasonably confident in my freehand skills, so I'm just going to paint some of my own on here. And this is also pretty easy to do. You can do your own without too much trouble. I'm showing the entire process of painting this one particular piece of it, just to demonstrate really how easy it is to make something that looks good without any kind of fancy materials or transfers or anything. Kind of block in some letters here. You may want to pick what you're going to have the graffiti say beforehand. I had a general idea, but just fill that in. Use a lighter color to add some contrast and extra visual interest to the bottom. You may be wondering, but Destro, my freehand skills aren't strong enough to outline this. Well, no fear. Number 8. Micron pens are your friend. Pens are a lot easier to control than a paintbrush, and these Archival Ink Micron pens that I have are really, really nice for laying down thin black lines, easy to control, easy to get those on there. Unfortunately, I don't think I waited for the paint to dry quite long enough before I did this, but it still worked. Normally these go on a little bit easier if you've given the paint sufficient time to dry. I was kind of in a hurry and I didn't wait quite long enough, so I had to fight them a little bit to get it on there, but with the paint properly dry, you should have no trouble at all using a Micron pen to outline your letters all nice and black and shiny like that. I did a few different pieces of graffiti on here, wanted to show some of the other process. This one, of course, just a few little brush strokes at the bottom, make it look like the paint has run a little bit when it was being put down. And over here, I'm layering a bunch of different graffiti on top of each other, because this is a nice way to add a lot of visual interest to a piece, and if you go out and you look at some graffiti in the world, it's usually, well, not usually, but often, it's been covered up and painted over a bunch of different times, so I figured there'd be a lot of different artists who are adding their own little touches to this this storage tank here, this derelict piece, and, you know, gang tags and the like and things. I also did do a black wash over top of this. That would help grime up the graffiti as well, and if you want the graffiti to look fresh, you can just do it on after the wash. But here it is. This is the finished project. I've absolutely had a blast doing this. I might do a few more of these for my own table. I think this one came out so well, and hey, if I don't have to film it, it'll probably go a lot faster. Anyways, I hope you guys had fun watching, I hope you learned a few things, and I hope I've encouraged you to try your own freehand. Great way to add little visual touches to your projects, and you don't need to be Richard Gray to make it look good. I'm certainly not, and I think it came out great. I've been Destro, you've been great, thanks for watching, see you next time.